Final hour OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Jamie Noodles, McLennan, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star, Keegan Matheson of MLB.com covering the Jays down in Dunedin later in the hour. Pitchers and catchers have reported they've arrived. Start looking ahead to camp. Darren Dreger coming up here in a moment. And I noticed Matt Murray trending online today because I guess he was down at the skate.
Yeah, Jonas.
Well, Jonas tweeted out the Leafs have 5 stalls for goalies in the room today. Ilya Samsonov, Joseph Woll, Martin Jones, Dennis Hildeby, and Matt Murray.
Mm-hmm.
So are we anticipating Matt Murray being available and stepping back in and being activated and his cap hit?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so, right, Noodles? But
no.
Then what's going on? Is he around the team? I mean, he's still a part of the team, but long-term IR, and I think in understanding you're not playing anymore, it's kind of strange. I don't believe he's weird. From Toronto.
No, but I mean, if he wants to try, he's still getting paid. He's still, he's had, I don't even know, was it surgery? What did he have? Season-ending surgery? I don't even know what he had. I remember Tree announced, he's had extensive surgery. It was
right, but no real depth on what it meant. You're right. And even today, Sheldon Keefe said after the game that Treliving was going to speak today, and then he didn't speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to why that would have changed unless Keefe said something he wasn't supposed to or something that was inaccurate.
It's just a weird transaction. Remember, it was he's not remember it last year. Matt Murray was good to go. He's available, but he's not available. Heading into the playoffs, wasn't he available? Didn't he dress or something?
Yeah, he had to dress.
Yeah.
He did dress against Florida because Samsonov got hurt.
That's right.
Yeah, he's available.
Yeah, and look, he's got a stall. He's had to stall at the practice rink all season. I've been down there a bunch of times. He's got a stall right next to the other goalies.
Mm-hmm.
So he's.
I guess you got to. He is a part of the team. You're not just going to kick him to the curb, of course. But I don't know. It's kind of strange that he's still around the team.
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to come back by maybe not, obviously not this season. I don't think anybody's expecting to be back this season, but I think he wants to continue playing hockey, as far as I understand it. So the only way back is to, sort of dip your toe in the water and start moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's what he's up to.
Yeah.
I don't know. What if you're can you imagine if at the start of the playoffs it was Matt Murray and Martin Jones, out of nowhere, at the start of the season it was Samsonov and Woll. And now, I think Woll is on the road to recovery.
Sounds like he's really close.
He'll probably play some games with the Marlies at some point and then get back. But
yeah,
it's just such a weird situation. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're talking 5 goalies that are within the organization. Hildeby has been up multiple times and still hasn't played. Yet he's collected NHL checks, but hasn't played. It's been musical chairs with Woll and Jones and Samsonov. And again, Murray's not a part of the program, but he's on the roster, long-term IR. He's getting paid by the team. So it is a little bit strange, but we'll see what Dregs can tell us about that as to maybe why, again, Keefe suggested Treliving was going to speak and why he didn't today. Maybe it has something to do with the appeal process.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they weren't planning on appealing, but now they are, and now Treliving doesn't want to speak publicly because it could have some effect on it. That would be understandable.
You don't want to torch the league when you're about to appeal to the commissioner for leniency.
Yeah, that's probably a wise decision to pull back on that one and decide not to do it. But, big win last night for the Leafs. Thoroughly impressive. We talked a lot about it at 4 p.m. Bobby McMahon, that's a really cool story. The idea that he wasn't even in the lineup, and then a few hours before puck drop, he finds out he's in. Alex Steves, at 5 o'clock, they had to call him and say, get down to the rink. We'll get your equipment. You meet us at the rink. You're going. And he played. He played over 10 minutes last night. Yeah. And just, for them to do what they were doing, that's a really impressive win. Without Marner, Tavares, Morgan Rielly. And they needed that. They needed something positive considering what happened on Saturday night in Ottawa. Here's Darren Dreger at TSN Hockey Insider. We mentioned, Dregs, that Keefe said after the game that Treliving might speak today.
Yeah.
Did that change because of Rielly's appeal process? Like, why would he not speak today?
No, that's exactly why it changed. And there was a fair amount of indecision as to whether or not Morgan would appeal the 5-game suspension. And really it comes down to the player and the Players Association more than it does the Toronto Maple Leafs or anyone else involved. But I do think that Rielly, the Players Association, and the Leafs, and probably J.P. Barry, who represents Morgan Rielly, need more clarity, more explanation as to, why this was elevated to an in-person. Now, we all watched the video from the Department of Player Safety, and it was explained in detail, as all of these videos are explained in detail. But I think that the player, the team, the Players Association just feel like, given the fact that we've seen other appeals, why wouldn't you? What do you have to lose? The only thing you have to lose, I guess, is some time. It's the Stadium Series weekend. Is the commissioner going to expedite this process? And it does go to Gary Bettman directly. He's the guy who can overturn this. Do we think that's likely? Is that even plausible? And when is the earliest he's going to hear it? And the belief is likely the earliest would be Tuesday. So now what are you down to? You've already sat 3. Is it 4 games by then? I don't have the schedule in front of me. So there was some back and forth as to whether or not time-wise it was even worth it. But in the end, Rielly, the Leafs, and the Players Association decided why not. But that was approaching late morning, mid-morning. And then at that point, I think Treliving just decided, okay, well, the process is ongoing. It's an open case now. So anything I say to the media, and the Leafs were hot yesterday. Let's just be clear. I don't know if you watched the pregame or the intermissions. The mood out of Toronto after that 5-game suspension, and initially how it was leaked, made that group very, very angry. So I think it was wise for the general manager in this case to just sit back and say, you know what, let's just pause this for a few days until we have full clarity, and I'll talk then.
Yeah, and I think that's probably wise. It's probably a smart decision. And, they got a lot of work to do between now and the deadline, and I'm sure we'll hear from Treliving at some point. But last night was a pretty eye-opening performance. It's a one-off. We know Marner and Tavares, we presume, will return tomorrow night. But considering the dark cloud hanging over the team and then the news right before the game that those two guys are out, that was about as impressive as you could expect. And, I said after the game, Jags, I thought Sheldon Keefe was really relaxed and, thought-provoking answers and really detailed. And he's generally like that. But it just felt like it was almost as if the coach knew, like that was something they needed last night.
Yeah, look, it was the only response that they could get from that group, other than who referenced prior to the game that Austin Matthews had to have a monster effort again. And it turned out he didn't have to have a monster effort. The top line didn't have to produce the way that we expected they would. Now, no one would have predicted Bobby McLennan would step up and have the opportunities that led to his hat trick, but that's part of the good fun that goes into that night last night, right? But collectively, and I'm not trying to kick sand on the Toronto Maple Leafs or use that game as a measuring stick, but I can appreciate how it would be frustrating, maybe for the coach. I didn't talk to Sheldon or the coaching staff. Maybe to management or certainly a fan base where, okay, they face this adversity and they come together and they play as a team, and that's how you win because they played the right way. TJ Brody looked like, a rock-solid defenseman. McCabe was really good. Liljegren was good. Go through the list, right? And the goaltending was as good as it needed to be. I didn't think that St. Louis gave much in the first period. I wonder how much of the Super Bowl they may have gotten caught up in after Montreal.
In Montreal, possibly, or Toronto.
Maybe had a rookie dinner or something like that.
I cannot confirm nor deny, but it just feels like it had a bit of that feel to it. Because, you know what, we know that St. Louis has been formidable. They've played some real good hockey for a stretch of games here, and they just really didn't show up on time. That's not taking anything away from the Leafs. So now it's moving forward, and whether or not they can duplicate that as they face a Flyers team, that's no joke, man. The Flyers did not expect to be in the position that they're in yet. they're looking forward to that game tomorrow night. You know, Morgan Frost, I'm sure, is going to have a group of people there. He's playing terrific hockey and playing his way lower on our trade bait graphic because of how well he's played and the other pieces in play that we know the Flyers have. So it's another test. Let's see if they can match the effort of last night.
Dregs, that's where I was going to go. You know, as well as the Leafs played, they got a big test tomorrow. But John Tortorella came out, when was that, Brian? Maybe a couple weeks ago, a month ago, where he was like, you know, we might be making some trades here or making some changes around here that people may not like as far as sticking the course of what the organization was going to be. And I think I'm paraphrasing, but him basically saying, like, you know, I know we're in a playoff spot, but we still have a plan here. Has that changed? Do you still believe that there's a plan that if they are going to move away from certain players, they will still execute the trade even though they are third in the Metropolitan?
I think it depends, Noodles, on whether they get their asking price. I don't think that the price on certain players like Sean Walker, Nick Seeler has changed, but it was high from the get-go, and that's why clubs have resisted making the trade to this point, and there's no reason for Danny Briere to alter that, right? I mean, you know, they're playing good competitive hockey right now, and that fan base historically, as we know, can be rabid, and the fans are loving every second of it, but they also know what the path is ahead. I saw the same interview that you guys saw referencing John Tortorella, and I thought he was very candid. I thought he was very honest. And keep in mind, he has a seat at that management table. It's a bit of a unique scenario, but he has a voice in the decision-making process. So he's invested, right? It's not just about winning games. It's about what's going to make this group a brighter future. I did think it was a bit suspect when he was asked recently about Scott Lawton, who remains on, you know, the trade bait list, and he said, he's inconsistent. You know, he kind of threw him under the bus a little bit and then retracted and said, well, you know, he's our leader. He's a glue guy. He's an important piece of this team and all of those things. And, I mean, they didn't falter even a little bit. So I think we can see what you're going to get in the Philadelphia Flyers, but their focus is on not rebuilding their foundation. It doesn't look like they have to do that, but maybe patching some of the cracks. Like if Sean Walker were to get traded at the trade deadline for a good pick, if it isn't a first, maybe it's a higher second pick, I could 100% see the Philadelphia Flyers signing him as an unrestricted free agent, bringing him right back. Does it make sense if you're a playoff team? I don't know, but there's a lot of hockey between now and Game 82, so I think that's the way they're looking at it as well.
Dregs, you talked about the Leafs organization being hot after the Rielly suspension and the fact that it was an in-person hearing and all that entails. You know, we heard Sheldon Keefe talk about in the wake of the announcement of the in-person that, you know, he wasn't surprised because it's Toronto and, you know, the kind of bringing up the conspiracy theory that the Leafs are hard done by because there's more eyeballs on them and more scrutiny than there is on any other team in this league. And, you know, how much of that is anger? How much do you think that is actually a belief that runs through the organization, that they are under a different kind of microscope than any other team?
Well, I think they are to a point because of the market and size of the market. I think it applies more to game in and game out. Players, coaches, and management. I mean, we all have stories to write, and we all have radio shows to fill. I'm doing insider trading tomorrow. I have no idea what I'm talking about. You know, like, I mean, that's just kind of the day-by-day grind in covering a major sport, and in this case, a mega market, not a major market. I feel like if Sheldon could take that one back, he probably would. You know, that was his honest opinion, so I'm not going to bury him for it. But did it help going into the process? No, it didn't help because what it's implying is that George Parros and the Department of Player Safety and the National Hockey League are going to be swayed by the noise or were swayed by the noise to turn it from a 2 or a 3 game suspension into an in-person. I have more respect for that group than that. However, I was in the chorus of people who thought after watching it several times in slow-mo, replay all of it, that it was a 2, maybe a 3 game suspension. So I can appreciate when you look back at some of the other incidents, and we're not talking 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, I took some heat because I rolled out the Blake Lizotte video. You guys remember this, right? He's with the LA Kings. He cross-checked Josh Morrissey in the face a couple of years ago and got 1 game for that. And look, the explanation is, okay, well, it was an altercation, and Josh Morrissey had engaged. Well, yeah, he dropped his gloves and his stick. Did he expect to get cross-checked in the face? Probably not. Is that less vicious than what Morgan Rielly did to Ridley Gregg? I mean, Morgan Rielly's stick was too high, no doubt about that. It glanced off the shoulder, hit Ridley Gregg in the face. A suspension every day, all day long. I just think that maybe the hockey world, and in this case, the Department of Player Safety, has gotten to a point where they try and drill down, to the mega nth detail as to what this is versus that, and the gap is too wide. And I think that in some respects, that's part of why the Toronto Maple Leafs and the management group, and probably the player, were really disappointed that it turned into an in-person and then the 5-game suspension.
With Darren Dreger, our TSN hockey insider, now you've done it. Joe from the Bridge is playing. He's been waiting to play other cross-checks from other players around the league. He's been waiting for it, and it was on a tee for him. Where was Phil Kessel playing in Vancouver on your bingo card this year?
Pretty high, to be fair.
Yeah.
Ryan, and I'm not, only because of Rick Tocchet and then Jimmy Rutherford and Patrick Galvin, and to a point, the Pittsburgh connection. I know Jimmy and Patrick, that's different. But I've always viewed Rick Tocchet, because I've had many conversations with Tocchet about Phil Kessel. Not recently. It's not like I had the inside scoop here, but just, back in the day and how he got the best out of Phil Kessel. Because, again, we've talked about it on the show before. Kessel in Toronto was supposed to be a primary performer. And there, by and large, I guess he was. But he went into Pittsburgh the perfect time to be a support role guy and fit that role perfectly. Were there challenges? Oh, yes, there were challenges. But Rick Tocchet was the perfect assistant coach to whisper in his ear every now and then and say, okay, smarten up and do what you're paid to do, right? So there's a connection there. So that's why I'm not at all surprised. But, a little bit more detail in what went down, and I love it because, we thrive in a Canadian market here. We just talked about Toronto being the mega market, and Vancouver is close. So Kessel's trying to sneak into BC. So he lands in Vancouver, and somebody spots him at the airport and starts snapping pictures, and that's how it got out, which I love, by the way. I mean, I guess Phil Kessel wouldn't be hard to spot if you're a hockey fan, but it's still a bit odd. Anyway, so that's how it got out. But he's there, mostly with the idea of signing with the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver wanted to see him skate. They want to see him test some things out. But there are probably 3 other 4 teams, I'm told, that are also in the mix. So if Rutherford and Alvin and Rick Tocchet don't think he's got anything left, then maybe they back away and he signs somewhere else. But I would put the money on the Vancouver Canucks signing them to an unrestricted free agent contract.
I love it.
Are there pictures or let people lay eyes on? What is this? What is he looking like? That's the.
I don't know. That's a good question. Although I do remember showing ODOG a picture when Kessel arrived in Vegas. Was it early last year, whenever it was? And man, he had slimmed down. Like he'd put in the work, and he looked like, he probably should have looked like a decade ago. So. I mean, Wade Arnett, his agent, has said all along, and we've followed this story pretty closely, that he's ready. He wants to play. So let's see. I mean, we can appreciate the role he's going to have if he signs with the Vancouver Canucks, but as long as the fire is burning in the belly and nothing else is in the belly, he'll be fine.
Yeah, listen, man, he's a hockey lifer. Like Phil, he's just a purist. That's what he wants to. He just wants to play, and he does everything else he has to get onto the ice. But he plays, and when he's ready, he never gets hurt, never misses a game, and I got a large appreciation for that because he's won cups.
Love him.
Yeah, his teammates love him. He doesn't have to keep playing. He's got no connection to Vancouver. None. No.
Right.
Cool story. How about Ovi, your boy? Everyone's boy. All of a sudden, he's scoring goals every single night. Like, what are we talking? Can he get to 30 now in the season? I think he's up to 14.
Yeah, I think he can. I was the lone wolf last night on the quiz, and I said I still have some doubt, and the doubt is just based on, how slow he started, and really didn't come alive until after Christmas. So it appeared, not appears, because he's turned some things around here in short order, that Father Time had caught up to him. But I still have some doubts. I'm cheering for him. I think it'd be a terrific story. I have no problem with Alex Ovechkin overtaking Gretzky, but I still need to see it. I mean, the legs don't go like they used to. That's not a knock. That's just a reality of where he's at.
Well, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
I'm pulling for him. For him. And, I mean, just for the story, I don't have a connection to Ovechkin at all, clearly. But the idea of keeping that story alive, will be intriguing for the next 2.5, maybe 3 years.
O called it, too, right? Like, Hayes, you and I were like, if he could sign off on 20, like, take it right now. And I was like, no way, man. Like, he goes, that guy can get hot, and all he does is score every night. What is it, 6 in a row, right? Yeah. So good for him.
I know we got to wrap here fairly soon, but I couldn't escape this segment on Overdrive without telling an O story. Okay, so and Noodles, you're like me. You're a bit of a hypochondriac, right? Like you don't like the germs and being around tough situations and all. I mean, exactly. I'll tell you. So O sits down in the chair last night, and I don't know if you guys got a taste of this through Overdrive, but about halfway through the pregame, he's sniffling and snorting a little bit, and he's starting to sneeze. But, I mean, he still got it together. He's still okay. Get through the first intermission, kind of same. He held it together. We're maybe halfway through the second period, and everything starts leaking. Like, he had a droopy eye with stuff draining out of it. His nose he was sneezing. Like, Cheryl Pounder and I are sitting beside him, and we're like, okay, bud, like, what is happening here? Get
out. Yeah. The thing is, he'd be the guy that would tell you, he'd be like, just go home. Just go home. Why are you even here? He'd be yelling at you.
He said that. He literally, third period, he's like, Dregs, he goes, you may not see me for a while, man. Yeah. He goes, if that were you wouldn't have a chance of coming back. So I feel for him, but he is legit.
No, he's fighting it.
For a while. Like, I mean, that's
well, tomorrow is like another exactly. We're on the air tomorrow. There's another TSN
may not see me
game.
For a while. You're not out for a month with the sniffles. You're sick. We get it, but like a while. Define a while. That's all I would say.
Exactly.
I'm going to make a loose prediction. I'd say somewhere around post trade deadline, the 9th of March, something like that.
Exactly. That's probably. Listen, if he can pull it off, he'll try. Don't give him any ideas. All right, Dregs. Thanks for this.
Yeah, boys, have a great night.
Darren Dreger. Speaking of that, of course, this is what O does every time, right? When we make golf picks, because generally we do a draft.
He takes the best ones and
he just sends me a 5-pack. He's like Scheffler, Rory. I'm like, and then I write back. I'm like, are you serious? And then he just writes back. He goes, please don't disturb me while I'm ill. It's disruptive. Like, all right, so this is who he's taken: Scheffler, Rory, Homa, Tiger, and Speed. He's the best. He always wants Tiger, yet he's always convinced Tiger's going to finish dead last. And he knows it. He's like, this guy can't play. He's not sharp enough. He doesn't blah, blah, blah. He's probably going to finish. I don't know if he'll finish dead last, but this is a great field. It's a very good field. So those are who he's on. And I am on, I wrote him back. I said, I will take Justin Thomas, Morikawa, Rick Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, my boy Ludwig Aberg. I'll throw in Nick Taylor, too, as a 6-pack. He can have Thigala as his 6th. All right?
Okay.
There you go. Those are the 6-packs. I have a Canadian because I love my country. He doesn't. It's all right. But I don't want to disturb him. I don't want to be disruptive.
I mean, he's got a pretty good team there, Hayes.
Well, if Scheffler can putt, he'll win this tournament by 10 strokes. Like, that's what's amazing about this guy. If Scheffler had been putting, even at a tour average, I would say, over the last year and a half, he'd probably have at least one more major and 3 or 4 more PGA wins.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this guy teed a green. He's like Tiger in 2000. It's crazy. And he gets around the green and putting, and it's just a mess. But, it's going to be a great week. And tees off tomorrow. Tiger Woods is back. And Tiger was speaking last hour. We'll try to get you an update on some of that. Keegan coming up. Keegan Matheson from Dunedin. And Pascal Siakam making his return. The Pacers in town. down at Scotiabank. We'll get to that, too. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Keegan Matheson coming up here in a moment. Raptors, Pacers tonight. Pascal is back, and we'll see how Scotty Barnes and company respond after being embarrassed on Monday night. The Maple Leaf Player of the Day is announced daily on the show. The Leafs lineup every week. We announce a current or former Maple Leaf player every day, again, each week here on Overdrive. And on Friday, you have a chance to call in a name all 5 players in the Leafs lineup of the week. Name all 5, and you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming game. This week, it's Leafs Golden Knights on February 27th. Go see the Cup champs down at Scotiabank. Plus, we're throwing in a $250 Vanilla Visa prepaid card. Vanilla Visa prepaid cards are available for purchase at Petro Canada. Today's player of the day is Byron Froese.
Wow, Byron Froese.
Byron Froese. Froese.
Yep, right.
I remember
shot.
him.
Oh, yeah.
Right shot. I was about to say the same thing. I think he wore like number 29 or 39 or...
That was a higher number.
Was it higher? Maybe it was. He wasn't here long. Like, how long did he play here?
I don't know,
long.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I thought it was maybe 39. That sounds
Okay. Yeah, he was a
right.
Marley for quite some time, but yeah, he played here in 15, 16, 16, 17. He played 2 games when like Matthews and Marner were up. And
He wore 56. I'm
he wore
looking it
56.
up. He wore number
Okay.
56.
Yeah, there
Number
you go.
56. All right.
Wow.
There you go. Okay, Byron Froese, your Maple Leaf Player of the Day. And again, Siakam and the Pacers back in town tonight. We'll get to that later this hour. But pitchers and catchers have arrived, and so has Keegan Matheson of MLB.com down in Dunedin. I'm sure everyone in Dunedin just as excited about your arrival as the players, right, Keegan?
Guys, they were lining the streets. There was a bagpiper. There were children holding signs. The King of Spring is back. It's beautiful. I'm here to support the local economy.
As you should. As you should. And we appreciate you doing this. And, like, this is a pretty symbolic day because, you know, we get the spring started. It's a long grind until you get to actual opening day. But it's been a very, I would say, underwhelming offseason. You know, hopes were incredibly high early on with the Ohtani chase, the link to Soto, among others. And then let's call it what it was. It was a really flat offseason in the end. But in terms of the energy around the team, the messaging day one, you know, what are you picking up on in terms of the message that the Blue Jays are trying to portray?
Yeah, this will be an interesting camp because not a lot happened in the off season. I did not have to do much this winter. There was not a lot of news coming out of this organization, and not nearly as much as I expected. Not nearly as much as I think this team needed. What the front office has been saying all along, I think, is what we're going to be hearing out of this team for the next few days, which is that internally they need to get better. That's easy to point at Alek Manoah, at Vladdy, at Alejandro Kirk, et cetera, et cetera. They are betting on that coming from within. That can happen, absolutely. It's not impossible. But have they set themselves up better than last year? I don't think so. They are really banking and really betting heavily on hope. And that's a bit of a dangerous thing in baseball. Baseball is a sport where it's healthy to be a bit pessimistic at times, especially when you're building a roster. And right now, unless something else happens, it looks like the Blue Jays are really betting on internal players and maybe some prospects showing up and pushing this team over the top, which we haven't seen them do the last 4 seasons.
Keegan, what do you need to see from Alek Manoah early on, just that there's a chance that either he's back or he's got a chance of being within striking distance of being back to being an everyday major leaguer?
For Manoah, I care more about the eye test. I care about how he looks those first few days. I feel like I'm turning into an old school guy. I want to look him in the eye or something like that. But with Manoah, I don't care if the fastball is a tick down or anything like that. I always think back, guys, to my main memory of Manoah last year in Tampa. There was a quote that made it all make sense for me when he said, normally he's on the mound and he's trying to throw strikes. Last year he was trying to not throw balls. And that's such a difference for a guy who relies so much on his energy, on his personality, on that beating the chest, stomping off the mound. That's what works for him. That's the beauty of Alek Manoah when he is good. But when you lose it, you lose everything. That's what we saw last year. So I really need that eye test from Manoah. I need to see that the person is back as much as the pitcher, because there's a relationship to still repair there, and he needs to get that going in the right direction. That would be a huge first step for the Blue Jays if he can get back to even in the direction. He doesn't need to be a third-place Cy Young guy, but solidify the number 5 spot, give this team some innings, and slowly work your way back. He's a guy I would still bet on, but a long way to go.
Well, Keegan, when it comes to the eye test on Manoah, how much of this is just going to be the simple, what kind of shape is he in? Like, we've seen some social media stuff that suggests he's going to arrive in better shape than we've ever seen him before, but how much stock do you put in the fact that maybe part of last year was just that he was not in the kind of physical condition you need to be a Major League starter?
Definitely. A big one for Manoah, especially because of the pitch clock coming back in last year. There was more than the pitch clock at play, but that's a factor. So you can say that with Vladdy and Kirk as well. Now, as a fellow, let's say, big-boned man, I know the value of a good angle on Instagram. You know, I'd like to see these guys up close in person. We'll see if it was just good lighting, but I think Manoah, that is key, because the pitch clock is a factor. That was a change that aligned with a change in his performance, so it needs to be there. Now, I am not saying that these players, Vladdy included, need to come in chiseled with 2% body fat. We have seen players of all shapes succeed, but when you can point to something more concrete, guys, like that pitch clock hurrying up, especially when you don't have your best mental game, when Manoah is on, he could be charging forward. He's a freight train. But if your mind is speeding up and the clock is speeding up and your heart rate is speeding up, just the realities of being a big pitcher, it's harder for him to get up and down that mound than Yusei Kikuchi. There's more body at play there, just from a basic standpoint. So that's a real factor.
With Keegan Matheson of MLB.com, you're right. I mean, once you got to see it. We got to see it. We got to know what you're about. And Manoah's not alone in that. Now, I can be naturally, cynical when it comes to sports, and we're looking at Manoah. I think it would be an incredible redemption story. We all love that idea. It'd be amazing to see. But another thing that sticks out in terms of the rotation, Keegan, is how great they pitched last year and how healthy they remained. Like Gausman and Bassett and Barrios and Kikuchi, they were out there every fifth day. And I'm curious, like, if you've spoken with Pete Walker or Schneider or the front office, like, are they bracing for the inevitability of someone missing starts or someone maybe coming back to reality a little bit in the rotation? In other words, not a flawless, perfect season like they seemed to have last year.
You have to. If all 4 of those guys combined to repeat what they did, I would be amazed. And that's not knocking the pitchers. I'm so impressed with what they did last year. That's hard, and that's something I respect more every year covering this team. Guys who can stay healthy and stay out there. It's not easy. But the realities of baseball, like you said, you have to be a bit pessimistic. There's going to be a season where the Blue Jays need 12 starters. And, guys, let's look at the last 2 years real quick. 2 years ago, Ross Stripling stepped in, saved the rotation, out of nowhere. One-man fix, easy. Last year, when Alek Manoah went down, their plan B, their immediate plan B, was piggybacking Trevor Richards and Bowden Francis. That's not where you want to be this year. Because if you have to go 3, 4, 5 deep, yikes. That's really going to undercut you. That's really going to hurt you. So Manoah being good is a huge part of that. Bowden Francis is a guy I really like. I think he needs to be talked about more. But then you're looking at a Mitch White. Will Yariel Rodriguez be built up enough? We'll see. Ricky Tiedemann's coming, the number 1 prospect. Very exciting, but can he stay healthy? Can he contribute consistently? A lot of ifs there. So that rotation, when we talk about the Blue Jays betting on everything going right, it goes the other way too. Not everything that went right last year is going to go right again. You need to win that net game. It's not all going to bounce your way, and they've got to be ready.
Hey, Keegan, we heard all the explanations after the debacle against the Twins and the sweep and pulling Barrios in the 4th inning and all the conversation that ensued after that and the blame game that came with it. How much of that needs to be repaired? Like the whatever fraying happened in that moment with this team over-relying on analytics and the general manager throwing the manager under the bus. Like, do you think this spring is sort of a healing kind of project for this team to figure out how they can move on after that disaster?
It has to be. And speaking of eye test, that's right up there. That's something that I actually want to see and, frankly, figure out what it means. Transparency, communication, every other big word you can think of. It sounds great, but what does it mean? What's it going to look like? How is it going to make this team different day to day? A lot of it for me is just treating players on an individual basis. One guy might want all the information. One guy might want none of it. One guy might only want it when he asks for it. And everyone's different. So I think the Blue Jays getting that right will be a big part of this. And I think a lot of that will be on John Schneider as well. But frankly, Schneider is a guy that I believe in as a manager and I think should be allowed to grow in this job. He has been kicked now these last couple of years, and we've seen how it looks. Not good. How's he going to bounce back from that? And can he take that step and develop as a manager, which is something I don't think we talk about much, but Schneider is someone who I think can do that. But you're not just talking about Schneider down to the players, you're talking about Schneider and the coaches up to the front office and the billion people involved in that throughout. So it's a complicated, tangled web. They need to untangle some of that, I think, is the simplest way to say it.
Keegan, it's day one. It's going to be a long ride, long journey. You'll be right there covering it with MLB.com the whole way. Always appreciate you doing this, buddy. We'll do it again real soon. Enjoy yourself down there.
You got it, guys. We'll talk soon.
Keegan Matheson, MLB.com. Jays down in Dunedin, pitchers and catchers reporting, and that means, a lot of guys are training down there. I've seen pictures of Bichette and Springer. A lot of them live down there in the off season. And, baseball, the season doesn't start for another, 6 weeks, give or take, but that flies by.
Oh, yeah.
It happens quickly. And, that rotation will be a big talking point. Like, who's going to fill that fifth spot? Is it Manoah? Is it Tiedemann? Is it other guys they have in the system right now? And, we'll find out.
Sorry, go ahead, Noodles.
I was just going to say, I'm curious about Vladdy. Like, honestly, my whole focus is Vladdy. For me, I've never seen a player hit the ground running so, all-star, MVP, all of that, and then, it's been kind of lukewarm. Like, we keep expecting him to go back to that. Was that first season the outlier or these last couple the outlier? I'd just love to see when the dust settles, what is he as a player?
That's going to determine a lot, and I can tell you who's relying on it as well is the owner, the marketing department. Like, they've got a new wave of renovations that are kicking in. They're already starting to leak pictures of them putting cup holders on seats in the 100 level, and they generated a lot of buzz last year. It was very justified. By all accounts, it was really well done. People, I don't know if it was unanimous, but the large majority of fans who went through there loved the way that they've built this park up, how they've changed the dimensions of it, the vibe in there, different options in terms of food, drink, seating, etc. And this is the next wave. It's not going to be as bold because a lot of it is underneath, I believe, and dealing with suites and dealing with the clubhouse and different stuff like that in the 100 level. But it is something they've paid for, and it's cost them a lot of money. And I think that's why they were so linked to Shohei, is they were trying to basically make him the face of this new ballpark, and it fell flat because he's in L.A., and I can tell you, the guys that they signed are not going to get it done in terms of Justin Turner is not going to sell an extra 500,000 seats or whatever. It's going to be Vladdy.
Wow.
They're looking at Vladdy saying, man, we need you hitting 45 bombs and being a stud and drag this team to the playoffs desperately.
Yeah, and that's what and let's face it here, they paid for the renovation, but the fans will be paying for it with increased prices, right?
Absolutely.
For years,
exactly, Noodles.
Yeah.
And I that's why I think it's going to be fascinating. Like, if you had to handicap the fitness test Olympics with who's going to look better, who's going to convince you they were actually working. Do you like Manoah? Do you like Vladdy? Do you like Alejandro Kirk? Do you like Phil Kessel out in Vancouver? I mean, there's an interest. I wonder who's going to show up in the best looking shape here, because I know that I guarantee you that management is looking at that very closely.
Absolutely. You have to. It's pro sports. You're relying on these guys. You're paying a lot of money. Manoah's admitted it. Or it's been well documented. He showed up out of shape. Vladdy a couple of years ago, very well documented. Kirk was late to camp. He was having a kid. He never got going. Never got going.
My favorite line, looking back on it, is, everyone's trying to be kind. It's like, oh, he looks so powerful. Meaning if you put on some muscle, you look thicker, right? Like Manoah looks so much more powerful. I was like, I don't know. It looked pretty big. Like, you look thick. And that's the thing. I hope he's thinner, and I hope he's more confident. That's all I care for him.
Right. And I can't speak to, how it works in the modern game, but you guys have said this. O's told his own stories. Like, he said it. Like, he'd show up and Paul Maurice would be like, you look big. You look like, basically, like, coaches would just be blunt. Like, you're out of shape. I'm looking at you. Yeah. Like, there's no HR in the room. There's no...
Yeah, there's no body shaming problems.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, society has evolved, and we've got a different approach on that. I would assume in pro sports still today, they will look you boldly in the face and say, "What the hell do you think you're doing? Like, what is this? What is happening? We're paying you a fortune. We need you." And it's a requisite in pro sports. It's a requisite. You have to be in shape. So yeah, we'll see. All right, we'll come back and tee up Raptors Pacers. What we can expect out of Pascal Siakam tonight. I think you could expect a lot of points. That's generally the way the Pacers operate.
Oh yeah.
Right. It might be 150, 145 tonight, but it'll be an entertaining game. I guarantee it. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, so we joke on the show a lot about the video montage and how at times it can be overused, but I think Pascal Siakam is certainly worthy of a standing O tonight, the montage. And, the discussion, I think, will continue to be ongoing about what the Raptors are going to do to commemorate that 2019 team and that era. And, we're all aware that Orlando is retiring Shaq's number 32. He was only there for 4 years, but that's the first time they've retired a number. And that leaves the Raptors and the Clippers as the only two teams in the NBA that have not retired a number. I think they'll retire number 7. I'm fairly certain they will. I think Lowry, his name number will go into the Raptors. That would probably be the end of it for me. Like, I wouldn't go there with Vince in 15. I wouldn't go there with Kawhi in 2. And Siakam, I loved what he brought. He was obviously a great Raptor. But I don't think it's like jersey retirement levels. No. I don't think so. I mean, I can get behind the fact that like the main players that won. But if you're going to go with Siakam, then I think you got to put Van Vliet up there. You have to put Kawhi up there. Do you put Serge Ibaka up there? He played a massive role. He was a great Raptor. Where do you draw the line?
I'm trying to say this respectfully. I don't think they were special enough. I don't. I mean, they won, which is great, but like, who was the most special on that team? It was Kawhi.
It was Kawhi, undoubtedly. And if he came back for one more year, like you said, you know what, I'm going to run it back and sign one, I'd probably be leading the charge. The fact that he left the second he could, I just can't do it. I can't, personally.
Well, the thing that scares me if I'm a Raptor fan is they're so bad right now that they might have to start trading in nostalgia, and like have these nights. Because right now, the best reason to show up to the ball or to the gym is to watch the opposing team, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't have a lot to offer right now. The Raptors is the home team. So, and you worry, like, remember when the Jays were on their, whatever it was, the longest playoff drought in pro sports. Mm-hmm. What did they lean on? They leaned on, hey, let's bring back the 92-93 team again. Yeah. Let's bring back this guy. Right. Let's level of excellence this guy. Because that was the only kind of good news story they could spin, right? And you don't want that.
No, you don't. I am curious, like, how many fans, how fans feel about where this is going. Because there's always the eternal optimist that is like, Scotty's going to grow, Quickly's going to be great, RJ, Pirtle stay healthy, Darko's the guy, and they got money in the summer, which they have. I'm bracing for like years, possibly, of them really struggling.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people are willing to acknowledge that yet because you haven't had to for a decade.
Yeah.
It's been 10 great years. 10 great years of winning in the playoffs every year and winning rounds and going to conference finals and winning in 19. Like, they are legitimately one of the like 6 or 7 worst teams in the NBA. Like that's what this isn't a fluke. It's not injuries. It's not like they're struggling.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to be tough. You don't turn that around in one summer, generally.
No,
so
it's going to take a bit. It'll be, I don't want to say a long road, but it's going to be a lengthy
It could be,
road.
though. Like, hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not, but, like...
Well, you got to hope you get lucky in a draft or two, right? You got to get lucky in a couple drafts, probably.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not easy to do. Like, look at their recent draft history. It hasn't been, like, they got Scotty, but there was a few whiffs in there, too, right? And so there's no guarantees, and there's no easy way.
No. I mean, you look at Houston, and that's probably the best-case scenario where, when they had Harden and Chris Paul, and they were a juggernaut, but then it was like 3 or 4 years where it was ugly. Like, a few years anyway, ugly. But they've come out. They got the coach. They hit on some draft picks. They signed. They had the money. I guess that's what I'm saying is, like, best-case scenario, you're like 2 or 3 years, and then you're back. You can't be Detroit where it's 5 or 6. Or Charlotte or whatever. You got to avoid that.
Right. So 5 or 6 with no sign of it getting better.
Right.
Like,
that's ugly.
That gets ugly fast. Man.
Really tough. And let's hope that's not the case. All right. Thanks, Dave. Good seeing you, man.
Good seeing you guys.
Thanks, Dave.
There it is, Dave Feschuk. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.